Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Full Compass Full Access webinar series where we bring you the industry experts to talk about the gear that you want to hear about. My name is Jim Ripp. I am the Director of Education and Live Event Production here at Full Compass Systems. And today this is part two of a series where we're talking about the Shure Microflex conferencing system. In part one, we went over all of the gear. Part two, we're going to be talking about the design phase and everything through the trips and falls that you have to go through and how to set up a design for your conferencing room. And before we get started into that, let's go over a few housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded, so if you have to duck out halfway through, feel free. The recording of it will be available. It will be sent to you if you're registered. If not, it'll be up on YouTube. You can catch it there as well. And by all means, use the question and answer feature that we have available to you. Ask them live. This is your chance to ask one of our industry experts on this subject that we have today. And speaking of industry experts, we have the one and only Sean McLaughlin with us today.
Hey, everyone.
How you doing, Sean?
Good. Thanks for having me back for part two.
Part two, yes.
Of the three-part series.
Of the three-part series,
of the
yes.
Three-part series.
We'll talk about that coming up, too. Excited about that.
Yes.
So in the first part, we just talked about the gear. Everybody got introduced to all of the wide variety of things that you have to bring to conferencing.
Yep.
In whatever situation, any size room, you've got it covered, right?
Pretty much.
And today we're going to talk about design, where to go with that.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of what we're going to be covering today is really just kind of some of the questions that typically, we get from the field of, what do I need to do to make this room work? So there's a lot of kind of things that we want to cover. That's just what the room is like. Like a lot of the information to be able to help aid in that design. And this is what the sales staff will do with customers to kind of walk you through. A lot of these slides were actually based off of a little questionnaire that we helped create for you guys to send out to customers to kind of get that information back to speed up the process of helping with the design and everything like that. So
excellent. Well, I'll let you dive into it.
Yeah.
And by all means, everybody ask questions as Sean goes along, because he's going to be talking about a lot of questions.
Yes.
So
I think we have a question already. It looks like maybe. Well, we'll see.
All right. Excellent.
So one of the first things that I always like to discuss with people is, how is the room going to be used? And that's kind of a loaded question because conferencing can mean, a lot of different things. A lot of people think conferencing, on my picture on the left here, you can see there is a traditional kind of conferencing space. It is a room, has a table, generally a video monitor or something in there for video conferencing, kind of that typical room. Conferencing also can be getting into larger spaces like we see here in the middle. This is going to be more like your school board or city council type space where you've got lots of people that are joining in the conference, a little bit larger spaces. We saw a big change with these during COVID, obviously. A lot of times, like the town board meeting, it used to be just, there were, I call it the peanut gallery, but, people could come to the meetings, ask questions as people of the county or the city where they were, they can come in live, ask questions. During COVID, obviously they weren't having live participants, so the people that were on the boards were spread out more in larger spaces, but a lot of this started being streamed. It was going out via Zoom or to YouTube or other things like that. So all of a sudden there was the need of conferencing, of bidirectionality, of being able to ask questions and also be heard in those spaces. So sometimes those spaces get a little bit more complex because it's also, I've got reinforcement in the room, but I'm also doing conferencing to the outside world, things like that. Classrooms are another common one like that, especially in higher education. You're seeing more where it's, I'm working with the room, but I might have remote participants or distance learning type applications. So.
5 years ago, it wasn't a necessity.
Nope.
Nowadays,
now it is, yeah.
You have to have it. You have to be able to on multiple different levels, be able to conference, live stream, video involved, everything. And
Yeah,
so,
we've even, I actually did a site visit for one of your customers up north. It was a smaller tech school in northern Wisconsin, so up there in the sticks, pretty close to Canada at that point. But they had multiple campuses, and all the classes were offered at both campuses, but sometimes it was distance learning that people were just in an empty classroom watching a video stream and the teacher was at the other location. So a lot of that was that, kind of two-way communication that is needed. The other one is getting into on the right-hand side, this is like more of a larger type conferencing type setup of, maybe a ballroom, a larger presentation where you typically have somebody that's going to be more of a presenter at the front. But a lot of people are now wanting to get into audience feedback and audience participation for asking. So we see these a lot of more multi-purpose rooms. Larger corporations are getting these for training and doing things like that where it's, sometimes I'll have a bunch of people in the room that I'm doing a presentation, or sometimes it might be used for just a internal conferencing, a lot of different things like that. So some of those rooms, you do get into larger, like some of our MXCW, which is our discussion systems, because you've got voice lift and things like that. Those are also really popular for portable solutions. We've got a lot of, there's a customer in town here that has their board national companies, so their board meetings actually bounce around to different regions in the country. So they're doing a portable setup of conferencing, because still some people are remote, but needing to get into a space and do something in a room that wasn't necessarily designed for conferencing.
So this is really one of the most important questions you need to ask right off the bat.
And a lot of it is asking, what am I using it for now, and what might I be using it for in the future? Just that you can I don't want to say future proof, but kind of have some of those plans. Like, maybe I'm going to use it for regular conferencing now, but there's a chance that we might use this for presentations. So we want to think about that at the beginning, so you can maybe do some forward thinking of how you're doing your processing or inputs and outputs, and like how much you've got on the system there. So something to think about. So I always really just ask people kind of like, what do you see and what do you envision? Because it sometimes changes with who's using the space.
So do you think even within that framework of what they envision, do you think it's good rule of thumb to kind of go just beyond that?
Yeah, a lot of times, budget sometimes, obviously dictates some
Right.
of that. But, having the infrastructure there, it's always good to plan for more,
Right.
and you can use less. So,
All right.
So kind of one of the other things that we like to talk about is the room specs. What are you doing? What does the room look like? First off, one of the things that we need to know is the actual size of the room, the length, the width, the height, because those are all very important things. We've been in spaces where, like our studio one over here at Full Compass, that has probably a 30-foot ceiling, versus going into a regular conference room that will have a 9-foot ceiling, so there's different things to be considered. We kind of touched on this on the beginning webinar where we were talking about the difference between like a 910 versus a 710 on how the pickup patterns are and things like that. So a larger room that has a high ceiling, you might not want to use the 710 because it's going to pick up more of the room, whereas a 920 is going to be a little bit more focused, on the participants. So that's something that you got to configure. Also, knowing the size of the room helps us determine how many microphones to cover the area. This also goes back to how the room is used, so making sure that you've got, like, oh, hey, this is where the table is. But sometimes we've got participants on the outside edge of the room for larger meetings. That's all things that we would want to know about in helping design the coverage. Because the best, or I guess not the best thing, but the worst thing is to get a system that's designed, like we thought we were picking up the table, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we use it on the outside edges, Then you have to accommodate for that or change the design to make that work. Another thing is, how is the room constructed? Is it carpet? Is there a lot of hard surfaces that make it very reflective, in a noisy
Super
room?
important to
Yes.
take that into consideration.
Yeah, and unfortunately, audio is the last thing that is generally figured out in the buildings. Architects love having very cool, fancy-looking rooms
Not
with
in this
lots of
building.
glass and reflective surfaces, and but that's all things that we need to know in helping design that room. If it's a very reflective space, your requirements for things like AEC and your echo cancellation might be different because of the processing that's needed to be able to deal with how the room behaves. If you're at the beginning phases of designing a space, this is also a good time to be talking about that of like, do we want to add room treatment, like
Right.
acoustic tiles and things like that, or add change the padding on the chairs, things like that are all sound absorption to help the
Right.
room sound better.
Processing can only get you to a certain point.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can run out of processing before you run out of what the room is behaving. So yeah, you just kind of generally want to know is like, what the walls are constructed. Is there windows? Is there, is it just drywall? Is there things on the drywall or curtains or drapes? Like what is in the
Is it a
in
drop
the space?
ceiling?
Yep. Is it a
and
drop
even
ceiling?
beyond the
Is it-
room, right?
Yep.
If you're going to be putting into the ceiling, what's beyond that
Yep.
drop ceiling?
Yeah,
What's up there in the
HVAC,
space?
yeah, in the space. Because even though your ceiling might be at 9 feet, you might have 20 feet above there. So, the other big one is like layout. Again, kind of how you're using the room. Of here's where the table is going to be. Here's where extended seating positions might be. These are all things that we want to know. Again, kind of how are you using that space? There's a lot of times that they're multi-purpose space. It might be a classroom setup. It might be a round U-shaped setup for a video conferencing. We run into that a lot in spaces, and that's one of the cool things with a lot of the Shure MXA stuff. You can create presets to change that coverage area of how that room is being used. But that's something you want to talk about at the beginning, just so again you've got that coverage and the design is set up for that. Another area is, like with, tables and seating, but like in a room where it's maybe a presenter area, okay, we know definitely at the front of the classroom or the front of the room where somebody is talking, we want that covered. So that's going to be 100% coverage area. But sometimes maybe in a classroom you want participation, or sometimes you don't want to pick that up. So being able to turn that on and off might be an advantage, because maybe it's if the room's loud and people are shuffling their books or whatever. You think like a pit classroom at a college or something like that. Maybe you want to be able to mute a portion of your pickup area. So that's all things that we want to do. The other one is noise level. Like what's going on in the space.
Or outside.
Or
right?
outside the room.
You got a railroad track.
Correct. Yep.
Train that goes by.
Yeah, I mean that's perfect example at Shure's headquarters
Yes.
in Niles. There is literally a train track of the commuter train right outside. So that's something to consider. And I did one actually downtown Madison. We did a room visit, older building down by the Masonic Temple off of Wisconsin there, and they have a conferencing room. It's a very cool looking conferencing room. It's a rounded room, has lots of windows, very reflective, hardwood floors. But it's an old building, so you hear the traffic going by, and it was actually perfect when we were doing the site visit, an ambulance rolls by, and you hear all of that. So it's just things that you have to think about. Another big one is like ventilation noise, ambient noise that's going on in the room. Do you hear the HVAC? Is it extremely loud? Things like that. Because it's, again, depending on how the space was built, it's one thing that you have to kind of consider. So thinking about that noise and that environment definitely helps from your processing
So I
standpoint.
see in this slide they're measuring the sound level. You think is that
Yeah.
a necessity to do?
It's not necessarily a necessity, but getting a good feeling of like, oh yeah, like generally like HVAC is probably the biggest one that we run into of heating and air conditioning, of like, oh, the fan's on in the room and it's, I have to raise my voice to be able to talk over that, but we don't necessarily need specific dB levels, although that's helpful if you've got the equipment to do that. The more information, the better.
We sell that too. So.
Yeah, that is true.
Room specifics.
Yeah, so room specifics, that's, again, one of the very important things with the room design is what it is all made of. Next up is kind of your technology requirements. So this one comes up a lot. We talked about this in the previous one of some of our partnerships. How we're Zoom certified and Teams certified and Google Meet certified, as well as others. But what are you using? What software are you using? Is it important that that device is certified, to work? Obviously, if you have a certified device, like with MXA products, you're going to get a better experience from that. And kind of just to touch on that, well, we talked about this in the last one, but what does it mean to be certified, or a whitelisted devices? So a device that is a certified device for, like, let's say Teams, for instance. If I plug in a random $20 Amazon USB mic that is not a registered or a certified device, Teams is going to look at it and say, okay, cool, I've got a USB microphone or an interface or whatever, but it's not certified. So therefore, I'm going to do the processing in the software, echo cancellation, noise reduction, things like that, all within my software, and I'm not going to rely on that hardware. It's basically just an input. Now, if you have a certified device, like our P300 with a 920 is a certified solution with Teams. So Teams, when it plugs in and boots up, it looks at it and says, oh, hey, cool, I see a device that is certified. So therefore, I know what this device does because that certification process is literally equipment goes to Microsoft. Microsoft tests it, works with the software. How does the latency? How does the echo cancellation work? How does it behave? And if they deem that it meets their requirements, they'll be like, all right, you're a certified, or sometimes it's known as a whitelisted device. But you're certified. So I am going to say that you meet my requirements. You could even be doing a better job, which is a lot of the times the case with certified devices because they're more powerful. It's going to turn off its processing or some of its processing, depending on what software you're using, and it's going to use the processing on the hardware.
Let that take over.
Yeah.
That's great.
So sometimes the advantage of that is, again, the processing in the hardware, whether it's a processor like our P300 or even the 920, has echo cancellation and everything built into it. That processing might be a better application. So just knowing what you're using and how you're using kind of also determines which direction you might go with hardware. Another big one is an in-room PC or bring your own device, BYOD. So this is a common one. So at Full Compass here, you guys are all on laptops now, it's because you can work from home sometimes, so got to have everything portable. So in your rooms, typically you're bringing in a device and hooking it up to the TV. So you've got multiple devices that needed to be hooked up to a microphone that is in the space and also a camera for the video conferencing. So you want to know, is it going to be a bring your own device? Also good to know, like, what are those devices? What's the connections for that? So you've got the correct cabling, USB-C, USB-A, USB-B, all of the different types of things.
Been through it all.
Yes. So like you guys have USB-C on your laptop. So that is becoming more and more common now as a standard. We've moved that way. Yay, iPhones now being USB-C. But a lot of those devices, just making sure that you've got the correct connectivity for your processors and things like that. If you're on a in-room device, which is also very common, a lot of people will have a dedicated room that has like a small PC, like a Intel Nook or of the sorts, and will have a room that you can walk in. It's scheduled. It's part of your room. I click join meeting, and there you go. Those are typically done with an MTR or sometimes just an in-room PC. But we've got like our IMX Room software is our processing that's in our P300 hardware device, but on a software application. So that if it's an in-room PC, I can put that on my Zoom room or my Teams PC and have that reside on there and do the processing that way. So again, it's just getting into the design choices of what you're doing and how you're doing things, because a lot of that changes what the hardware is. One of the big things we get with the presentation application of somebody talking, versus conferencing. So conferencing typically has more latency. Obviously, it doesn't generally matter because you are going out to the internet and going to thousands of miles away.
Right.
So there's naturally latency in that. But in a space where I've got a presenter microphone that's coming out of reinforcement speakers, I need to have less latency, or it gets that weird, awkward thing where you can't talk in the talk in the room. So that, things like that might help determine how you're using or what device you're using. Like a P300, for instance, has less latency than the IMX room software. So it's like, okay, well, maybe I wouldn't be using the software because I'm going to be doing some in-room processing, things like that. So you definitely want to know what type you're connecting and things like that. The other big one is your networking. So get into AV. They said it'll be fun, and now we all have to learn about networking. So we had mentioned this earlier in the previous one that'll pretty much most of our software runs on a Dante backbone, or our hardware, I guess I would say. So it's communicating via those digital protocols. We're getting into networks. So as AV people, I highly encourage you to do your Dante certifications to learn more about that, as that is becoming more and more standard. So
it's free, by the way.
It is free. So those communications, not only is the audio being transported via the digital, but also your control is typically an IP protocol that is going on there. So
that's also where you run into a huge variety of depending on the business or who's doing the conferencing, right? It may be like here we have a very complicated networking system that's held within the building.
Yep.
Right, and you may want your IT department to be able to have eyes on everything that's plugged in.
Yep.
Versus somebody maybe just a very small, not worrying about networking systems.
So that's like one thing that you want to check out, because especially if you are going into a larger corporate environment, generally the IT department controls those those things. So that's stuff that you're going to need to look at. Like there's certain ports that need to be open for Dante and the communication and things like that. So that's all stuff that you want to learn up front if possible, so we can just get that information to the correct people of like, do you want this on your network? It depends. It is widely varying of what things can be on networks based on the corporate environments. You get into things like healthcare or banking, things like that. There's some pretty strict network
or
military installations.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times there's very restricted things that you can do.
Correct.
So you need to talk about that with the IT staff of like, here's what we're doing, here's the protocols. It's becoming more widespread, obviously, as more devices are going to like Dante and other protocols like that. But it's always good to talk about. So is your hardware going to need to be on a corporate network, and what is that requirements? Like, does that meet their requirements? Also, you want to work with those IT people to figure out, are your switches capable for running Dante? Most modern switches are, but if you've got older network or something like that, there are requirements that our microphones or anyone's products really that are running on Dante have to meet certain requirements, to be able to actually to work on them. So are your switches and your networking gear up to snuff? I guess I would say. The other one is, a lot of times a smaller type application will run an isolated network. Maybe it's just about the connection of the microphones and the processors in the room. So a lot of times, you'll run a smaller switch. In the room, it's isolated. It doesn't really talk to the outside world. So again, it kind of depends on your corporate environment. So that's one thing to think about. The other one is outside network access. So there's things, depending on what we've got, our designer software, our IMX room needs to see the outside world for its licensing and things like that. So again, just making sure that depending on what you're doing, typically when you're getting into a conferencing space, it genuinely has outside access because you're calling out to somewhere. But usually there's internal conferencing type things between just different buildings and stuff like that, close network stuff. So that's just also another consideration is, can my gear see the outside world? Does it need to see the outside world for updates or potentially remote assistance, of somebody who's managing that maybe is off campus? Can I dial in, to see the software to be able to set everything up? So that's another type of thing that you got to make sure, especially with your network side of things. So,
Excellent. Any questions out there that anybody has? Feel free to type them in the question and answer section there.
got it.
Questions about these questions?
Questions about my questions about my questions. So, another one is, microphone requirements. Like what are you looking, this kind of goes back to, again, use case of the room. So, a presenter, capability. Do you want the presenter to have like a physical mute, for I need to mute things or control aspects of the room? Some of that can be done through our devices, like our mute button. It can be set up to mute the microphones. Sometimes you're getting into more advanced things with, third-party DSPs, control and stuff with like, biamp or symmetrics or other things like that, that you've got the ability, like what type of control does that presenter need? Also, what type of microphone style fits the room? Does the presenter want to wear a lapel or a handheld? Or are they fine with a ceiling microphone? That's becoming more common because especially colleges, colleges are really liking to use the MXA like 920s, previously the 910s also, because there is nothing for the professor or teacher to accidentally walk out of the room with. They have to keep track of less hardware because it's all up in the ceiling, kind of thing. So it just kind of goes into like how are people wanting and what are people wanting for microphones.
That's our preference here is the ceiling.
Yes, the ceiling.
Like
Nothing.
it's clean. You walk in, the table's empty.
Yep.
It's plug and go.
So yeah, it kind of depends on the environment. Some people love a gooseneck microphone. It gets the microphone closer to the person. It's a better thing. But then, okay, I have to wire those, or if I'm using wireless, are they charged? Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more maintenance. But it's again something that you need to think about for the space. Also, we see this a lot more in education of if it is a multi-purpose space for multi-teachers, I could have 5 different varying opinions of what type of mic they want to use and how they want to use things. Right. So we see it all over the place. A lot of conferencing, especially in like C-level suites, the higher end rooms, they don't want to deal with anything. They just want to be able to walk into the room. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Join my meeting. Right. And that's where a lot of the ceiling microphones come in. So you just kind of want to look at the style of what you're using, a ceiling, gooseneck, handheld, lapel, and maybe you've got multiple options. So it's just, you want to think about that at the beginning for the design. The other one is microphone location. So locating the microphone within the space based on how you are using it can change where you're positioning it. It's a little bit harder in a multi-purpose room. So sometimes you might be, maybe one mic is perfect for the coverage of the room, but because it's a multi-purpose room and it's configured in different ways, you might end up putting 2 microphones in there to be able to accommodate all those different types of setups. The other thing, where speakers are normally positioned, things to think about, displays. TVs in the room. We're primarily talking about video conferencing nowadays.
Right.
It's not just audio conferencing. So you got to also think of how are people using the room. Okay, well, if it's a video conferencing space, most likely I'm facing the screen. So I'm going to want to position my microphone justified to where
based on how people are facing.
So again, that gets into, depending on the room size and how that is, maybe I do need 2 microphones to cover an area. Maybe I'm not using the full capability of the microphone, but I've got better positioning. It all still boils down to physics. So pay attention in the early years of learning of, how physics works and things like that. But, the optimal positioning is obviously just like with any microphone, that my voice is being projected and picked up by a microphone that is typically in front of me. Mm-hmm. It's going to sound different if the microphone's behind me. Yes, I'll be picked up, because there's reflections in the room.
Totally different sound, though.
But it's a different sound. So that gets down to the intelligibility, which also gets down to how does the room behave. If it's a very noisy room or an echoey environment, your need for intelligibility is going to be that much higher, because you're trying to overcome the environment a little bit. So looking at where people are sitting, how the room is being used, kind of goes all into that design aspect also. How are we going to position things? Where are we going to do all that? So next up, a lot of the Shure products do require certification. We kind of touched on this on the beginning you got to be certified to install those. So are you looking to install and do all of that on your own? Are you going to be certified? Obviously, the Full Compass team can help you with getting those certifications. Or do you want to have it installed and programmed? Your sales team, you've got the ability to also provide remote commissioning. So you can have somebody dial in from afar and be able to do listen to the room, help tweak the room. So that's a service that you can do. So just kind of like what your capabilities are as a customer. Do you want to learn about it, or do you want somebody to handle it for
Somebody
you?
else to handle it.
So yeah, there's a lot of things with that on the installation. So next up, we wanted to talk about a room that we're going to be doing here at Full Compass.
Yeah, so the idea is we are actually taking one of our conference rooms, is we're going to do a complete redo of the room itself, and we're going to include all of the Shure Microflex system. So you have a little...
Yeah, we've got a little video here. So this is the manager's conference room upstairs. It's used by multiple departments at Full Compass. It's a decent sized room. It's actually a fairly well behaved room. It's it's got about a 9-foot ceiling. You can see here. There are some things that we got to look about avoiding. Obviously, motion sensors, sprinkler systems, HVAC. Kind of all the stuff that lives
lights,
up in this
everything.
There's a couple windows in there, so there's some reflective surfaces. The tables that are in there is kind of a multi-function space, because the room originally was designed to be a little bit transformable. But over the years, it kind of narrowed down to a larger table. So we're actually working on replacing the table and stuff in there also, and setting the room up more for a video conferencing type space.
Right, so when it shows the ceiling there, just... everybody take a look at, that's a big challenge. Let's see.
Let's see if I can pause it here for you. And it's very artistic. Frank did a great job putting this together.
Thank you, Frank Summers, for that. All right, here we go.
We'll pause here. So,
yes, since we're doing an in-ceiling speaker.
Yep.
You can tell by that there's a lot to navigate around through there.
Yeah, another one that's interesting, which we'll show in the design, but where your grid lies. So where the table is going to sit in the room in relation to where the TV is and everything. Just so happens to be the center of the room is right down where a spline of the ceiling grid hits. So we're making some changes in the room to remove that little center section and make 2 short tiles to get the microphone in a more ideal spot. That's the cool thing with MXA is I can move my coverage area. It doesn't have to be directly in the center. It's more aesthetically pleasing. So the people that are more, I don't say more concerned, but the design people that are more about the uniformity of the room and how it presents the feng shui of the room. So that's one thing that you got to consider is like, how's the grid placed? Where are the things that we can't move? There's a sprinkler system. We talked about this earlier. There's a sprinkler system that's not being moved. Can't be moved. A light maybe can be moved.
Right.
An HVAC system possibly could be moved, but
Possibly,
99% of the time, generally not. So those are things that you need to avoid when you're setting up. So that sometimes can prove to be a challenge, especially with ceiling speakers, trying to get them out. We're going to show you the design software here in a minute, and you'll see like where I'm positioning the speakers based on where these lights might not correlate. So we might have to make some adjustments. Luckily, it's not, too crazy large of a space that moving a speaker 2 foot to get around a ceiling tile or something like that is going to make huge design
So we have a question here that popped up. It says, does Full Compass provide design services is there a cost? So when you're with Full Compass, there's a lot that comes with us, right?
Yep,
We have a
exactly.
tech team, a salesperson, we'd have you involved as well.
Yep.
It's there is no charge for that. No, we don't have a team that goes out on site to design, but
Yep.
we absolutely will help design the space based on, if we have pictures like this, we can and know your end game. We can our tech team can absolutely help in finding a solution.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like we said, a lot of those slides were based off a little questionnaire that we send out to the customers. You fill it out. Here's my room dimensions. Here's how I want to use it. We do ask about some things like budget. I always hate being a sales guy and saying, well, how much money do you want to spend at the beginning? But that really also determines what you're putting in the room, because maybe if you say you got a $5,000 budget, cool, that might be certain devices are going to go in there that are going to fit with that budget, because we also don't want to go and be like, hey, here's this cool room that's 20 grand worth of equipment, and then you're like, oh yeah, the budget was 5. So then you go back to the drawing board. So that's one of the questions on there. We can also help with the tech team. The tech team works with me regularly of when we get these questionnaires of like, hey, what would you recommend? Here's what we're thinking, bouncing it off of the people. Obviously we've got the direct support of Shure too. So getting the engineers, if we're getting into a really tricky space, we might get the tech teams over at Shure involved also. But pictures, video, a lot of times we'll do, a Zoom call or a FaceTime call of just somebody on a cell phone, because at least that way they can kind of point things out and show you what the space looks like. So the more information we have, the better for that.
Any floor plans
Yep.
that you have of the building or the space that you have, where the electrical is, all of that is very important, and absolutely we will help with the design of that.
Yeah, definitely.
And what's nice is going through us, then you have we're like 35, 40 people in house that are certified on the system, and then we're a direct conduit to Audio Biz and to Shure.
Yep.
If we need to escalate things. So
yeah, so no charge for that. We mentioned the remote commissioning. That is something that is charged, because we're dialing in, we're tweaking the room. There's some things like that. It's not something that you have to do, but it is an option for people if they want that white glove service, I guess I would say. So
awesome. All right, we're going to jump into the
so let's jump into the design software here. So we're going to pull over. I'm going to pull this laptop on my lap here, and we're going to escape and switch over to our software here. So this is the designer software. So this is a free design software you can download from the website. This is the newest version, just got released here, called Designer 6. And Designer 6 is the latest version. So this is used for setup and control and programming of all of the MXA products. Designer 6, there are a few things that are not in here yet that are slowly getting added. As they do updates, this is going to be kind of the main conduit for setting everything up. Now, some of the devices also do have web interfaces. Like if you just hit the IP address of a microphone, like a MXA 902, there's a web interface that you can use for setup also. It doesn't quite have some of the design features here, but there is that functionality. So designer software is Mac and now, it was PC originally, and now is Mac and PC. So you've got the ability to work on everything. I'm typically a Mac user, so we'll see me fumble around on the Windows PC here. But the software is the same based on your platforms, so it's really nice because I can design it. Typically when we're helping you guys design a room, we'll design it using the designer software, and that's something that we can provide you. We can send you that file, so when you open it up on your computer the day of to install and do things like that, you've kind of already got a good starting place for it.
All right, so great. So we're going to get to see firsthand you taking what we've given you,
Yep.
as far as the room and the space that we want to, and you're going to design it right
Yep.
here.
So
live.
yeah, we're gonna show how that works. So I've got the designer software up online here. Unfortunately, I'm not online with any devices currently right now. But if we had live devices that were plugged in, I can see those. There's some really cool functionality in here, like I can identify, so it'll make the lights flash on the unit. So as you're installing, which is what we're gonna do
Right.
later on. So
Part three.
Part three.
We're going to
talk
actually
about
take you through
actual
the install.
Yeah. So, there's things like you can identify. So I've got a pile of speakers, which speakers what, based on where I'm putting in my design. So there's a lot of cool functionality when it's online. Also, this is very helpful for people that have, you maybe are taking care of a bunch of conferencing spaces to be able to monitor, so they can actually go in, they can see what's going on. So it looks like we got a question here that I cannot read because I'm too far away.
Is this software from Shure? Where can I download it from?
Yep. So the software is from Shure. You just go onto the website or just Google designer, Shure designer software, and it'll take you to the website. Also, if you're going on any of the MXA pages, it's also linked there. You just got to fill out your name and email address, and they'll pop it, and you can download it right away. And it's a free software. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you can start messing around with it early on and just.
Yep, definitely.
So
first thing that we typically do when you open up Designer, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be kind of a blank Designer canvas. We're in dark mode here. There is also a light mode, but with the display behind us, I'm using dark mode. It works better in the studio here.
how long is it? Is it a very long download? Because I would suggest if you're live, why not download it now?
Yeah, no, definitely. Go to the website. No, it takes a few minutes to install. It's pretty quick.
Download it now and follow along and learn as we go. That's always a great way to learn. So
afterwards, if this is something that you want more of a walkthrough, Shure on their SAI has some very good tutorials on this. Also, we're more than happy to set up a call with you to kind of walk through some of the features, with your salesperson and kind of walk you through the design and learning the software.
all right, let's see this.
So typically what I normally do is I start up here. So we're going to name this. We're going to say this is the managers
conference.
So I'm going to name this. So this is very helpful when you're designing and you're deploying in a bunch of rooms. So maybe I'm going to eventually have 5 rooms here at Full Compass that has MXA products in there. And at this point, if I have the rooms named, I can see what products in what space and be able to dive in from a service standpoint. So we're going to name the room there. And typically where I start is on my coverage tab here. So the coverage tab is just going to pull up this grid, kind of defaults to a 40 by 30 room. But if we click the little icon up here, you're going to see it kind of highlights my room green. And I can actually drag around and change, change the size of the room. If I also click this properties tab, I can just say that this is a 70 by 70 space. And you'll see that it changes. Another big thing in here is the height. This is where you're going to set your height of the room. So the MXA ceilings microphones, generally to get that A-weighted speech rating, that high intelligibility, you're going to be within about a 12-foot range. So 9 to 12 foot is pretty common for most conference room spaces. If you're getting into a larger space, there's plenty of things, where we've done pit classrooms and things like that it is 20 feet in the air. It'll still work. There's some things that we kind of talked about this on the beginning when we were doing the overview, but the further away the microphone, the larger the areas are. It's just like a flashlight beam. The further I fly it away or shine it away, it's going to be a little bit larger, which just, it'll still pick up people, but there's potential for more picking up the room noise and things like that. So, again, design conversation. So we're going to set this at 9 feet. That's the default. 9 feet is actually what the manager's conference room is. That's pretty standard for most commercial buildings. Another cool thing is you can add an image. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add an image of the manager's conference room. And this was just pulled off of a blueprint. And you can see here that we have the room. So I'm going to expand my room so we see the whole design here. And this room, as you can see, a little over 20 feet by a little under 18 feet. So it's not a huge space, but This conference room table that we're putting in there is, I believe, like a 12-person, so good sized room, multifunction space. So you've got some options here. So one thing that I always do is, well, how do we know that this is to scale? So we've got a thing in here that if you hit edit image and say I can draw to scale. So you click on draw to scale and you're just going to draw a line. So luckily this plan has what the dimension is. So we're going to say it's 20.7 inches or 20.7 feet. So it now scaled the drawing. So now my room, so we'll scale my work area back down. Man, it's hard using a computer that you are not used to. So we'll scale this area back down, our work area, and then we'll just fit this so we're zoomed back in. So now we're to scale. So if you look up here, it's 24.3 by 21. That makes sense based on where I've got the line. So I'm a little bit larger.
Right.
So over to the side here are the products that we can choose from to put into the space. So in here, this is the entrance to the room. This is also a good thing that typically if you are needing to get a reference and you don't have measurements, counting ceiling tiles in a room, easy. Normally they're 2 feet, 2 feet or 4 feet. Widths of doors, I can never remember what it is. I think it's 3.5 feet is a standard door width. Google that one. Don't quote me. But you can kind of use some of those dimensions if you know what that is based on the space and pull that in. So we're going to be designing with the MXA 920 because that's what we wanted to put into this space.
Put the 920 in there.
So we're going to take a 920 and I'm just going to drag it onto my room here. So I've got my 920, and if I can click and use this mouse, I can move it around, position it in the room here. It's a little hard to see, but there's a little Shure logo on here. And why that's important is you're looking at this from a bird's eye view. I'm looking down into the room. So on the front of the MXA unit, there is, it just so happens we've got one here.
We do.
It is the black one. This is actually an old MXA 910, but same kind of size here. But you'll see there's a little Shure logo up in the corner there. It's a little probably hard to see with the light and stuff.
Got the lighting right there. It is.
There we go. You can see it kind of above his hand there. This is just a reference point. So when you're being able to move this around in the software, like I'm going to rotate it. So when you're putting it up,
got it. So you
make sure that logo is in the...
line it up with that, how you have that there.
So I did the logo. You can see the little logo is the line here. And I am going to face that towards the TV. And that's also just so happens to be where the light is in there. And the light is actually used for... You can use it as like a mute indicator, like if it's green, if it's on air, and red if it's muted. You can turn that off if you want to. So the display in the room is going to be over here. So I'm going to actually justify this microphone. Oh, man, I am not having good luck. So I'm going to justify this microphone to the front of the room. You can also snap this to a grid. A little hard to see the grid lines here, but I'm going to be suspending between the grid here.
So just to give you a reference right now, currently, we're rearranging this room. It's orientation.
Correct.
We're totally,
its orientation is being flipped.
Changing it totally. The display currently is up there where he's
yep. So on the top of the screen here, and the tables are in the middle.
So that's where the display is currently, and the table is just a big square table that sits in front of it.
So we're going to go to more about going to a boat-shaped table or an angled table, so it's a little bit better for video conferencing, and it's going to be going this way in the room.
So in making a change like that, we have to move electrical. We have to change a whole bunch of stuff. We have to make sure that the availability that we can plug in all the processing, the Ethernet cables and everything, where we are going to put the display and based on the shape of the room.
Yep, exactly.
So there's things outside of just designing this that you have to take care of, I guess is my point.
Yes.
You have to be aware of.
So you know this is kind of big gray box. So when I click on it, it turns green. So this is the coverage pattern out of the box for an MXA 920. So an MXA 920 will cover up to a 30 by 30 area out of the box. So this was one of the things with the 920 and the updated software. It's just easy mode. It's using our IntelliMix to determine how it's actually using the room, and it's just going to cover a 30 by 30 area. I can move this area around. You can see how my little thing expands out and moves around. So I can choose where that coverage is going. And one of the cool things that we've got is with the microphone now is either dynamic or dedicated coverage areas. So out of the box, it's going to default to a dynamic coverage area. So what that's saying is I'm setting this up to just be like, I want to cover this area. And the mic is actually going to have the intelligence to say, I'm using X amount of the elements that are in there. You know, we talked about this earlier. There's hundreds, a little over 100 microphone elements that are in there that make up 8 lobes or quadrants, you know, kind of things. So the mic is just going to choose based on how it's hearing things in the room of how it wants to use those lobes and where it's actually going to, how it's going to be picking you up. So that's going to be a dynamic zone. The other one is a dedicated zone. So a dedicated zone is a zone that we can set up that a specific area that I always want covered. So like the presenter area, or maybe where the CEO sits, you know, that you want.
So lock it in, don't change
lock it
anything.
in, and this zone will always be covered no matter what is going on.
Got it.
So obviously we're not in a 30 by 30 room. So we're going to take this coverage area and we are going to shrink it down. If I know how to operate this mouse pad here. So we're going to shrink it down into the inside of the room. So we're going to say that we want to pick up the whole room. If maybe there was a coffee maker or a mini fridge or something on the side of the room, you know, maybe we want to make this coverage area smaller and only cover where the table is going to be. We can do that. Again, physics are involved. You're still probably going to potentially hear the coffee maker or something in the corner of the room.
Or your espresso machine.
Or my espresso machine that I bring to demos. But it won't be, the microphone won't be attracted to pick up over there because it's not in that coverage zone. So in the dynamic mode, we're just going to set this up right now. The mic's going to just do its thing. It knows that it's at 9 feet, and this is the zone. Again, we can create multiple zones if you want to, kind of depending on how the setup of the room is. If you click on the microphone over here and go to coverage, man, I cannot do, and I can add a coverage zone, and this is where it'll give me that dynamic or dedicated zone.
Then it just gives you another block.
Gives you another block.
How many zones could you set up?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head. I probably should know that, but you know, generally most
we'll
rooms,
look it up.
We'll have to look that up. So like another cool feature that you can do is I'm going to add a dedicated zone here. So you'll see I get my little block. I can't place zones on top of zones because that wouldn't work. So I am going to click on my main zone here, and we're just going to move this, and I'm going to take this dedicated zone and I'm going to move it over to here. And you may ask, why am I going to put a dedicated zone right by a door? That's kind of dumb because people come in and out of a door. So by doing this, I can put a dedicated zone, but I can mute that zone. And it basically kind of creates an exclusion area of, I don't want this.
That's why you want to put it there.
Exactly, that's why I want to put it there. So I don't hear the people coming into the room. So you can kind of mess around with this. Again, you can click on the zone. I cannot operate this computer, but you can change the size of the zones and everything like that. If you want to remove it, just click it, delete it off, and then we're back to our dynamic zone here. So now we need to add some speakers, because we've got our microphone in here. So we're going to go with the MXN 5Cs. So these are our PoE speakers. So I'm going to drag one onto the room here.
There you go.
If I can get it. And you'll see that it gives this little, when I click on it, it gives you these rings. So this just kind of shows that major coverage area, 6 dB down and 9 dB down. So this is how it's going to behave in the room. So I use this to kind of line up. So typically when I'm doing designs for maximum coverage, I'm kind of using that 6 dB down area. So we're going to say that this room probably will need 4 speakers. So I'm going to line these up approximately where I would position them in the room. So this goes back to, we need to double check and make sure that I am not hitting my HVAC. So, so an elevation plan. You had actually created a thing, which unfortunately I forgot to upload. But you created
So it needed to be
a grid.
We could have the grid laid on this, and then we could just place those.
Yep. So
where
you can
to
do that
avoid-
as an image and just know. Oops,
Yeah.
Not another 920. We'll add another speaker here. So I'm kind of overlapping my 9 dB down. So in this situation, I would have really good coverage in this room. Being that it's not an overly large room, I probably could scale this down to maybe just 2 speakers, because again, generally it's speech reinforcement. I don't need it to be super loud. It's a conference call. But we'll go with good coverage here. We're going to do 4 of them. So these are all network speakers, so it's all being powered over PoE. PoE Plus for the speakers there. So that's going to be all powered off the switch. It's just network drops to all of these. So I've got...
Any concern that you need to have about placement of the speaker compared to the microphone?
No, because when we're doing our processing, there's a thing called AEC, which is acoustic echo cancellation. So what that does is it's actually a reference of my audio that's coming from the far end. Because my microphone's going to pick up the speaker, but what it's doing is it's analyzing what's coming from the far end out of the speakers, so somebody talking. And the microphone can then analyze that and hear that signal and remove it from being picked up to creating feedback. So the positioning of the mic isn't super important to where it is with the speakers. Same with also where it's positioned to HVAC is a common one, or projectors in a room. With the 920, because again, we've got those flashlight beams coming out. It's a very small pickup pattern when it's coming out of the microphone. So even though it might be next to an HVAC vent, it's still picking up some of that noise, but it's a lot smaller because it's in the small portion of the pickup area.
Then in the P300, you have the processing. You can
Yep, exactly.
process that out of there. And
So
get clean sound.
this is our layout. We looked at that this is good, and we go back to our routing screen here, and you'll notice in our routing screen now we've got a bunch of blocks here. So these are all my speakers. This is my 920 microphone. So we've got all of our speakers here. And this is, if you're familiar with any DSP, it's just a line DSP. I can connect my outputs to my inputs and there. We're going to take a P300 processor, which is the processor that we're going to use, which is this guy sitting here, another nice black box, kind of hard to see there. But this is our hardware processor. So we're going to take that P300, and we're going to use that as the interface for your computer. So it's got that USB connectivity. It's also got the network connectivity, so it's going to be receiving those Dante signals from the microphones and also sending Dante out to the speakers because it's all that Dante network going on there.
This thing ties it all together.
Yep. So we're going to take that P300 and we're going to drag it onto our display here. So this one, you'll notice it's got 10 inputs. So the P300 has 8 channels of echo cancellation and then 2 channels that you can bring in, maybe like a presenter mic or something of the sort. And then you also have up to 8 outputs, 8 Dante streams that could be feeding things. Cool thing about this, anytime I double click on a device, it will actually, if I can double click, will open up more detail about that device. So I just clicked on one of the speakers. So on the speaker here, you actually see that there's 2 inputs on there. So there's 2 Dante inputs. So why do we do that? One typically would be your feed from your far end. This is my main input. But a lot of times maybe there is a larger DSP that's doing paging or fire alarm or something else in the building. So I can actually run a secondary feed into that speaker that might be able to be broadcast, like in case of emergency, you could do that. Also on here, there is a speaker output. So you can daisy chain from this speaker out to maybe you're going to an analog system or an amplifier that's doing dumb processing, that's just an amplifier that has a Dante input, and then it's feeding analog speakers for part of your design. So you can actually choose how that output is going. So it can be pre-DSP or post-DSP. So after the processing that's being done in the speaker, then I can send that out, which makes it easier for tuning down the line there. You also have delay. So this is helpful in a larger space that is maybe a training room, and I want to do delayed speakers to mimic the natural decay in the room of a person speaking at the beginning, so in a larger conference room or a training room space. So I can put delay on there. I also have a parametric EQ, so I've got a 4-band parametric EQ, so this is tuning for that speaker. It's not tuning the input, I'm tuning the output at this point. So you've got that of that speaker. So this is really helpful, like if you're getting a buzzing or a rubbing, from the speaker vibrating or something's loose up in the ceiling, so you could maybe put a high-pass filter in there or tune some of those frequencies out. And you can also have a limiter on here, so you can put a hard limiter so people can't blow up the system. Generally not a problem in conference rooms, but you never know.
You never know.
And then you also have the ability to increase the output level of those speakers. So depending on where they are in the room, if you need to raise or lower those speakers independently. And then you also have the ability to mute them. So this is all things that you can do as an administrator that might be administering a room. Maybe you do have a speaker that blew up or is damaged or is causing rubbing. Well, maybe I'm just going to mute that one speaker in the room to get through the meeting because it's kind of annoying or something like that.
So with this, assuming we have this, we're already built in, it's already sitting in the ceiling.
Yep.
It's all there. You don't need to be in the room to adjust this. You
Correct.
can
As long as you're on the network. Yeah.
As long as you're on that network.
And you can see the devices, you can remote in and do that control.
And control it. That's great.
So I'm going to go pull into my 920 here.
Where are we at? We're 1 hour here.
We're on 1 hour. We should probably, we still get people online. We'll go through this. We're on the final stretch here. But so the 920, when I jump in, you'll notice I just have one little control block here. So this is my auto mix. Again, I said out of the box, that MXA 920 is going to be set up with an auto mix IntelliMix system. It's going to just put it up in the ceiling, adjust my coverage area, and I'm good. In here, we have processing within the microphone. So the microphone, depending on how your system is set up, you may or may not need a P300 because you've got the ability to do processing on the microphone. So in the microphone here, if we double click on here, so this first block is AGC. So AGC is automatic gain control. So what this does is it will actually lower and raise the volume of that microphone or the pickup area to accommodate for quiet talkers or louder talkers. So you can go in and set what your target is, and then you're going to say, like right now, the default is plus or minus 6 dB. So it's either going to raise the signal by 6 dB or lower the signal by 6 dB. So this is something that you can turn on and off and play around with based on the talkers that are in the room. I always find this hard to set up for me because I'm a loud talker. So I always gotta be a little quieter. So. The next block is our AEC. So this is our acoustic echo canceller. So this is what we touched on before of removing that echo that can happen if you don't have echo cancellation. So again, kind of touching back at the beginning of this call when we were talking about certified devices, software, Teams, Zoom, all of those have echo cancellation built in. But when you're getting into multiple microphones in a room, it may not be able to handle the processing. So that's where using a hardware echo canceller comes in.
It's guaranteed that everybody out there that's watching has experienced that.
Experienced the echo
in a meeting, and all right, who's got the echo going on here? Somebody's
So this is the echo canceller. This is just the reference signal that's coming in, and then the ERLE is how much echo is being removed. So like how much of the processing is happening. Down here also is a thing called nonlinear processing. So this is part of the processing. You've got 3 different settings. By default, it starts at medium, and you've got low and high. So nonlinear processing is dealing with reflections, and there's a lot of math going on. I don't understand how it all works. I'm not that smart. But if you've ever been on a call in a very reverberant room and they've got a lot of processing, it kind of makes you sound kind of like it sounds like you're underwater, and that's because of that nonlinear processing. So that's one thing when we're tuning a room is you're listening to the room and determining, do I need to increase processing? Do I need to decrease processing based on how the room is behaving? It defaults at medium. Generally, when I'm tuning a room, I turn everything to the lowest settings because it's less processing, better audio quality. So as you're going up in the processing, you sometimes affect how the audio quality,
The end result, yeah.
the end result. So
Start low and then
start low, and you can always increase. So that's the echo cancellation. The next one is our noise reduction. So
Big
noise
feature.
reduction
Yeah.
is looking for consistent noises in the room. The projector fan, the HVAC, the fan going on, things like that. So noise reduction is a constant noise, and it sees it as constant noise, and it removes it. So a lot of updates to the software codecs like Teams and Zooms now have noise reduction. So you can eliminate the fan on your computer and things like that. So noise reduction is looking for constant noise. Noise reduction is not the person tapping on their pen or eating chips or things like that. That's not part of that noise reduction algorithm.
Good example is driving in your car and using the Bluetooth in your car, right?
Yep. It's looking and listening to the road noise.
It's listening to the road noise, and it gets that out of the way.
Yep.
That's why some people sound like they're holding the phone right up to their,
Yep, exactly.
their heads.
So again,
this does the same thing.
You've got low, medium, and high, just how much it's working to remove that. And again, this is something, it defaults to on, but you might not need it on based on your room. So it's one of those things, turn it off. If you hear a lot of noise, turn it on. Is that the result that I want? Next is a parametric EQ. So I've got an EQ, so I can tune the microphone. Generally, we're rolling off a lot of the low frequencies, kind of pulling out some of the, referred to the honkiness or the boxiness, to make that intelligibility the best. And this is something that is good to be listening from the far end, because you're hearing, tuning in a room is very hard. So listening from the far end and hearing how the room is behaving is a good way to do this. You also have a compressor in there. So we all know what compressors are, but that's going to help with dealing with those sudden loud noises and keep everything level there.
Yeah.
And then we also have a delay. So the delay on the microphone typically is, you're working with video conferencing, so sometimes you want to delay to a TV for video lip sync or things like that.
Right.
Or potentially delaying where the microphone is in the room. So you've got that capability. So right now, this all just shows that one output because the microphone is on dynamic. So I'm going to quick jump over. Sometimes dynamic doesn't work because of the environment. Typically, when you're getting into a very echoey environment, it's going to increase how that microphone is processing. So sometimes we want to be able to position lobes in specific areas and narrow them down and do some things manually. So if we jump back to our main design here and double click our MXA 920, I guess I was in there, and I'm going to go up to here to my settings, and I'm going to turn off automatic coverage. And what this is going to do, it's actually going to, if you're very familiar with the MXA 910, when this first came out, I had my 8 coverage lobes.
Right.
And what that'll do is that will put me back into, if we click back up settings, you'll now notice it says channels up there instead of IntelliMix. So if I go to my channels, I now see my 8 lobes that are in there and where those lobes are positioned. So right now I actually have 8 direct outputs that I can have from the microphone, plus that auto mixed channel. So depending on what I'm doing.
And you have the processing on each.
Correct. So now I've got the processing.
Each one of those lobes.
Yep. So in a room where it's very echoey or a challenging room, a lot of times I will go to independent outputs. So going to a P300 has 8 channels of echo cancellation. Well, that's great. Works perfectly designed with an MXA. But at that point, I've got individual AEC references. So I've got 8 references happening based on the reflections that is hearing in that specific zone of the room. So you've just got more processing that's happening. Again, challenging environments, I always really recommend going with that IntelliMix or automatic coverage setup. That works great out of the box, and it's just, if you need the tools, they're there for you. So let's jump back to our schematic. So how do we wire all this up?
Yeah.
You got to make it all happen. Well, Shure made it super easy for you. We have this little button up here called Auto Route.
Oh man, that's
so if I click Auto Route, what it's going to do is give me a little pop-up here that just says, hey, I'm going to create my routes. So what this is doing in the background, it's actually making my routes within the Shure software, but it's also making routes with Dante. So using Dante controller, you can see all these routes happening in there, but it does it all for you. So you don't have to open up Dante controller.
We like things that do it all for you. Right?
It's also going to turn on mute synchronization. So if I mute, my P300, I mute in my software, it is going to mute the microphone through the software because of that communication. Or if I have an MXA mute button, I'm muting, it's actually muting the software. So you've got the ability for that. So that's being turned on. It's also going to do some optimized audio settings, for EQ, turning things on, turning things off. So it's basically kind of an easy setup for you. So once I click auto route, all of a sudden I now have all my routes. So that easy. I've got all my routes. In this application, we're using that auto mix out. So I've got that one mix out of the microphone, and it's going to my P300. And then my output of my P300 feeds all of my speakers. Pretty simple. I am going to show one thing here. If we go back to our MXA 920 and
go to
my channels,
individual.
and then we go back to here, you'll notice now I've got 8 outputs plus my mix here. So if I actually go back in and go auto route, because it knows, hey, I've turned this on for a reason. So if I go auto route again, what it's going to do is give me my 8 individual lobes out to my 8 inputs in my individual echo cancellation. So it's that easy.
Just if some people are confused, what is all these wires? It's one Ethernet cable.
Correct. So these are virtual wires.
It's virtual
This
wires.
is a virtual wire, yes.
So how it would translate to the room is we would have
So everything is
5 Ethernet cables.
correct. One for the P300, one for the microphone, and one for each of
the speakers.
The speakers. So that's my network connectivity. They all go back to that PoE. We're putting a PoE plus switch in here because the P300 runs off of PoE plus, and then the speakers are PoE plus. The microphone just requires PoE, but it's fine on a PoE plus switch. So, yep, 5 network cables.
So that switch is opened up. A switch is a switch, right?
Yep, a switch is a switch.
You just got to make sure you have the correct power for the PoE.
Correct, exactly. And that it meets the requirements for Dante signal.
Right.
So the one thing that we didn't click on is our P300. So this is our processor here. So if I double click on this, we're going to see all of the processing that's within the P300 here. Because we were on those individual channels, what it did is it optimized. It knows I'm using a P300. So what it did is it turned off the echo cancellation in the microphone and is using the echo cancellation in the P300 for all of the processing because it knows I'm probably in a more challenging environment. So my first 8 channels here are my Dante inputs.
Lobes.
Those are my lobes coming in. And then you'll see that we've got a parametric EQ, echo canceller, noise reduction, automatic gain control. And then all of those individual lobes, or you can think of them as individual microphones, all go into the auto mixer then. And then the auto mixer determines what is opening up and which lobe is turning on and off. I mean, they're all picking up sound, but the IntelliMix DSP analyzes me when I talk in a room, and I'm going to be maybe picked up by the closest lobe and then one over here that's maybe next to me. But it's going to look and analyze the audio and say, I sound best out of this lobe, and that's what it's going to open up. You can also set, in the auto mixer in here, you can also set a priority channel. So a priority channel is going to get priority. So the CEO, the important person in the room, you can set that area, or if it's a trainer or something like that, you can set a priority zone. And then you can also turn zones on and off. It'll show that up here. You can also set something to be always on, so it will never mute that channel. So again, that presentation area, or the money channel as we call it, is, that can always be
the money
on.
channel.
The money channel. Yep, the ones that pay the bills. So, so if we're going to go back here and we're going to look at our schematic here. After you get into the auto mixer, you have another EQ that you can do. So you can EQ each individual channel, and then you can EQ the whole output of that auto mixer to, again, fine-tune that room. This is where my compressor is. And then that feeds into a matrix mixer. So if we double click the matrix mixer, what this is it's just showing where those signals are routing to. So right now, the individual output channels or the input channels are not being routed to anywhere. So if we're looking on here, my auto mix channel is being routed to my analog output. So like if I was connecting into like a Cisco or a hard codec, we'd be doing that. And then it's also going to my USB out, because my USB out is how I'm communicating with Zoom or Teams.
Right.
And then there's also a mobile out. So this actually has a 3.5 TRRS jack on there, so tip ring sleeve, that you can actually hook a cell phone into. So you could bring somebody on a call, plug them right into your headphone jack, which is getting a little bit harder to do nowadays because most cell phones do that. Yep. So there's the TRRS jack. A little hard to see with the black.
Right here.
There you go. So you can bring in somebody on a cell phone and use the room's audio to talk to somebody on a cell phone. It's pretty cool. So that's what that matrix mixer is, just showing where all those routings are going here. I like going back to the schematics. So this is those Dante outputs. So maybe I needed to feed another room, or maybe I need to archive something and record something. I can route that to a computer. So I've got those direct output channels available to me. Here's my analog output to my codec, my analog to a speaker. So if I'm tying in an analog amplifier and regular, not network products, you've got that. You've also got EQ and delay there, and then my USB output.
So is it 2 analog inputs?
So correct. There's 2 analog inputs, so you can see
2
them.
analog outputs.
2 analog inputs, 2 analog outputs, and then you also have 2 additional Dante inputs that do not have echo cancellation. So typically we use those for a presenter mic, lapel, or a handheld. Generally, those types of microphones don't need as much processing because the microphone, as you can see on me, is this far away from my mouth. So less likelihood of picking up because of the gain structure than a ceiling microphone is going to pick up the room. But it's one of those things, depends on the environment. You'd have to play around with it if you need to use one of your echo channels for that. So in here, you've got the ability, you can jump around, you can look at my inputs and change the view. So this shows all my inputs in a different way. I can turn my gains up and down. If I don't have gain control on there, I can mute specific inputs. I can solo them. So just like a regular mixer, man, I cannot left click on here. I can solo, I can mute. You can change mute syncs and things like that. So we've got another question.
All right. Each single channel has AGC and AEC, correct?
Correct. When going through the P300,
Thank you, Catherine, for that question.
in this situation, I have 8 different echo cancellation algorithms that are running. So again,
8 different.
typically I would be doing this when I'm using a more challenging room.
Right.
So if we went back and turned that back onto the auto mix, it's actually just going to be using one echo reference because it's using it as one giant microphone system. And when we would see the wiring, it would just be coming in on input number 1. So
That's great that you have the ability to like break this thing down and really fine tune it to exactly what you want. You don't have to.
Correct.
Auto mix, but
so we did
fantastic.
mention this earlier, presets. So the P300 has 10 different presets. Also, the microphones have 10 different presets. So the presets could be used, right now I have nothing saved, so that's why it's saying that. But those presets could be in that multi-purpose room of different configurations. So you are gonna have to go into the software and click that, but somebody that's managing the AV system can be like, oh, this room was set up as the U-shaped table. I know that's preset number 2. I click that. That's going to change how I've EQ'd and processed the room. And then maybe I'm also triggering a preset in my microphone that just has a different coverage pickup pattern. If you've got things set up in dynamic mode, which is one of the benefits of dynamic mode, as long as you're covering the floor space, you don't really have to reconfigure the system. So there's another advantage for that type of space. So you've got those presets in here. Also, getting into settings, that just gets into, the naming of the units, so you can know what's in what room when you see them on the network, where your metering is, things like that. You've got USB device. You can change how it sees, your computer sees it, as whether it's just a USB, a speakerphone, or an echo cancellation device, which is, again, talking back to your webinar or your conferencing software to let it know how it's processing. And this is also where you would go in and set IP addresses and things like that. So depending on, again, kind of going back to your network. So, but really that's kind of the overview.
So we got our design now.
We've got a design right now. If we were online, we would actually, down here it says 0 online devices, a little hard to see, but I can click here. It would show you all of the devices that are online, all their names, all their IPs.
And we will do that.
And we will do that in the next one.
In the next one.
But if I had my design done, I've done this offline, and what I do is if I go to deploy and connect, right now it's going to give me an error because, I'm going to save and continue. It's going to ask me to save my design, and we'll say manager's conference room. So we'll save that. And then what it's going to do is, here's my devices that are in the design here. And then over here, it would show me my devices that are online. And what I do is I drag my device that is online over my virtual device, and it associates that programming with that device. And then when I hit, which I can't do right now, I can set a password if I want to password protect everything on there. And then once I hit confirm and continue, it pushes all of that programming that we did to those devices, and then everything is working at that point. So it makes it super easy to deploy systems as long as you understand this and understand the software. If you're looking at a large corporate network that has lots of devices, that's where you get into having to be a little bit more conscious of how you're naming things, because everything's going to have a generic name of MX5N, and maybe you've got 100 of those throughout your building. You might want to say, hey, it's the manager's conference room number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Have some sort of system
Yep.
in line. Yeah.
And same with that, a lot of IT professionals will do that with IP addressing also. So you can do static IP addresses from there. So.
All right, this is from Brent. Is there a hardware device that can switch presets?
Not that Shure makes. We have used IP controllers. There's some generic ones out there that we could follow up with you afterwards, like an 8-button control that's just sending out a control string. So there are hardware devices. Shure does not specifically make one, but there are ones that you can work with the Shure system to do presets or use it as a mute or things like that. Also commonly receiving commands, like if you were using like a P300 for your processing, but you were maybe using like a Symmetrix DSP, you can have the Symmetrix, when I touch a touch screen, send out a mute command to the microphone. So you've got that.
What do we got up here? It says, are there any provisions for dry contacts or other means to disable sound masking voice privacy when video conferencing is in use?
Ooh, that's a good one. There are no dry contacts on here, so there's no like GPIO on like the P300 that could do that. I'm just trying to think of a way to do that. Typically, you'd be in a more advanced DSP that has the ability for doing some more control with that. It could be accomplished, but not with the P300 hardware.
Got it. That looks like all the questions we had there. All right, so
awesome. We went a little over. Appreciate you letting me talk.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for everyone staying on.
But we've got,
we got a design.
We've got the design. We got the equipment that's there. We've already started the process of getting electrical moved over to get ready for what we're going to do here.
Yep.
In the next webinar, we're going to be broadcasting from there.
That is the goal.
The goal is to be broadcasting from there using the mic that's in the ceiling.
Yep.
And doing some demonstrations on that, but also have some video clips of what we went through in the installation process, because already we've identified some challenges that we've had.
Yep, exactly.
One being the ceiling with as much as up there,
There's a lot up in there.
or the wall that we're going to be going into.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of explain how we get across that challenge. Right on the other side of that wall
Yep.
is a cement shaft for an elevator.
Yep. Exactly.
So how we mount everything and how we run cables and all of that is another challenge. But we'll go over that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So it should be fun. And myself,
Yep.
you are going to help.
I'm gonna help. I'm gonna strap on the tool belt and
Awesome.
bust out the ladder. So.
And a quick shout out to Declan Dwyer here, who's running all of the live stream, making us look good. It's hard to make us look good.
He's got like 12 monitors up. He's bouncing back and forth. That's good.
He's giving us the questions and everything. He's going to be helping us as well.
Yes, definitely.
He's our pro audio tech support guy here that just swims deep in everything audio. So we're
He's probably like me. He probably doesn't like actually being in front of the camera. He's more the behind the scenes kind of guy. but you know,
he's waving at us.
You know, sorry, Dak. You know, you get to be on camera this time, maybe. So
One of these, yes, this time you will be.
Yeah,
yes.
so.
All right. So I think we're good
Awesome.
for this time. Thanks everybody for joining us. And again, if you have any other questions, we have a full access at fullcompass.com email address. Go ahead and send your questions outside of that. So if you're watching this webinar on YouTube later on, that's where you would ask your questions.
So one more time.
Full access.
Full access.
Full access at fullcompass.com.
There we go.
So, all right. So that will end the webinar for today, folks. Thanks again to everybody for joining us. Thank you, Sean, one more time.
Yes, I appreciate it.
We got another one. May 30th is when we plan running the third webinar, the
Yes.
final part in the series.
Yes.
And registration.
Unless you want us to do more, you know, we can keep on doing these. I enjoy these. It's kind of
So,
fun. I feel like I should get like a smoking jacket and an ascot and a pipe or something like that. But
something like that.
we can do a fireside chat. You know?
And I'm assuming on our YouTube channel, I can point down below here. There will be a link somewhere down
That's
below
true.
here for the third webinar
Yes.
to register for that as well. So hope to see a lot of you return for that.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.